the Neo-Brandeisians don't like the consumer welfare standard. They think it's too confining. They misconstrue it. But look, they have this whole, the whole 40 years is, the whole failed 40 years is a fictitious thing built around attacks on Robert Bork. I do this shtick when I go in front of audiences where I ask antitrust lawyers, in your practices, how much do you use the Arita Hovenkamp treatise, and compared to Bork? It's like 100 to 1. Bob Bork was very important, and the Chicago people. I wrote an article about the Chicago School where I started with Ruth Kobayashi. We come both to praise and bury the Chicago School of Antitrust. Chicago School of Antitrust was enormously important in getting rid of the craziness of the 1960s and 1970s, but that was 40 years ago. The Chicago people most of them had no vision for how to do antitrust on a day-to-day basis. And it's because they were writing against this nutty stuff. I would put on the board three things about merger policy. The first one was we'll stop mergers presumptively with a 4-firm share of 60%. The second was 3 is enough, and the third is the marginal case is 6 to 5. Question: which one is Chicago? The audience would say 3, and I said, you're wrong. It's a trick question. They're all Chicago. One was Posner, one was Bork, and the other was Bill Baxter. And they couldn't be farther apart in the antitrust spectrum. It's just an example that there was no Chicago position on mergers. There was no Chicago position on predatory pricing. There was a Chicago position on a few things. And it's because there was a Chicago position on getting rid of the garbage. The Chicago School was like the famous analogy of Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, who were together as close as you could be on getting rid of the British. But when it came to running a government, they didn't agree. But of course, in 1776, they weren't worried about running a government. They were worried about getting rid of the British. It was only in the 1790s that they disagreed. And so the Chicago people didn't come into this. What they're criticizing was when the Chicago people weren't talking about running government. The people who matter just as much, if not more, about modern antitrust law are Phil Arita, are people from Harvard. Stephen Breyer is the most important justice on the Supreme Court. And he's someone that they're throwing under the bus too. Like I said, they hate transportation regulation. I met Stephen Breyer in 1975 when he was convincing Ted Kennedy to support transportation deregulation. And one of the things that they have actually started on now in the executive order is re-regulating the railroad industry, for God's sakes. No one across the antitrust spectrum until very recently would have had anything good to say about the old transportation regulation. And in that report that Lena Khan was involved with, the big House report that came out last fall, a dozen times they praise railroad regulation. It's an amazing example of how they praise this history that had been almost unanimously discarded. And
discarded by economic analysis as well.
Correct. But almost everyone across the antitrust spectrum in the so-called failed 40 years, including, like I said, the Obama and Clinton administration.